Get more from your supplies using one die 3 different ways. That's coming up next on Catherine Paper Art. So this first card creates somewhat of a stained glass look on a white background, where I use a black frame and fill in with some inked over pieces. That gets matted on a black piece of cardstock, and then that gets mounted onto the card base. So the process is simple. I just use Distress inks. You can use any inks. And I just mix them together, not really paying any attention to blending, just really going for an organic mix to look more natural as they would if they were really stained glass. Then once the colors were mixed, I used the die and cut them out and took the pieces to fill in the black flower frame, which I had already glued onto the white cardstock panel. That gets matted on a black piece of cardstock, and then that gets mounted onto the card base. And you can see I used foam tape for the backing of the panel and mounted it to the cardstock base and added embellishment, the confetti sequins. Then I die cut a sentiment and added that to the front as well. So the overall effect is a bright splash of color that's set off by the black frame, and it's really very pretty. This next card is a stained glass easel card. Now I may have made the process look more difficult than it really is, but that's only because I changed my mind after I'd completed the card. It's really very easy and it's a lot of fun to make. So again, I start with a black die cut of the flower frame. I'm using a piece of tape to clean off the little hairs from the die cut. When I cut the flower from the Neenah cardstock and the black matte cardstock and the card base, I need to keep in mind that all four of these layers have to be in the same location. In other words, they have to coordinate to line up. So I have to keep that in mind, and I have to make sure that I measure so that they do line up. Because I'm going to keep these negative pieces to use as matte layers on the card front. So after I've cut my flowers out of all the layers, then I put the black layer in the front, and on the back side I put a piece of vellum, and I double stick tape that on the back side. And on the back side I use my Copic markers to color in the flowers and the leaves. Now it helps to have that black frame stuck in on the front so that I know where to color the petals and where to color the leaves. Otherwise they kind of just blend together and you don't know where your guidelines are. You want to make sure that you use dark colors because they always show up lighter on the vellum. So if you use light colors, light marker colors, they're going to hardly be seen. And depending on the colors that you choose, you may need to go over your coloring several times to try to blend them a bit. And you can see the colors that I've used, but any colors, you can use any colors you want. So after I've finished coloring in my flower, and I'm going to assemble the card front. So I'll take the top layer, which is the card panel, the white Neenah, and I'm going to mount it to the black cardstock, the matting layer, and those two pieces then get mounted to the card base. And on the back side of that, I will mount another Neenah Solar White so that nobody will see the vellum, the tapey mess. And I'll take one of the white die cut flowers and fill that in just to make it look neater. And that's where you'll use some of the bits that get cut out along with the front of the flower as well. And it just makes it look cleaner and neater. The stained glass flower is actually inset by 3 layers. You have the top layer, the Neenah cardstock, and then the matting layer and the actual card front. And that forms 3 layers. So the stained glass is inset by 3 layers. So these layers of paper help create depth for that stained glass flower. And that emulates a real stained glass window where you have the leading encasing the different colors of the slag glass. So it helps to create that illusion, especially when the light shines behind it. You can see I've added another panel onto the back of the card front with the flower cut out. I've inserted the flower frame and it just makes it look much cleaner. Now you'll see in the video that the card is not actually an easel card, it's a top folding card. And at this point I changed my mind and decided I wanted to make an easel card. So I cut the card off at the fold line and grabbed another card base, another top folding card base, and on the front of the card I scored it at 2 3/4 and folded it along the score line. And then I took a rectangular cutting die, one that was big enough to keep an opening for the flower die so that the light could shine through it to make a stained glass look. And I put that through the die cutting machine so that I would still have enough along the sides to glue the bottom of the card to, and you'll see that in the next step. And then I took 2 white flower die cuts and glued them together onto the inside of the card to act as the easel stop for the easel to stand up. And I put my sentiments on the inside as well on top of those die cuts. In one card I filled in those die cuts with the pieces of the flower. In the other card I left the die cuts empty and just kept the frames there. And I think I like just the frames better. Now the next card is the watercolor splash with the double white die cuts on top of it. Unfortunately, I don't have that recording as that got lost, but it's very easy. I just used the distress inks and squished some of that out onto my glass mat and used paintbrush and some water and stroked them onto the cardstock. Again, the Neenah Solar White Classic Crest. and blended them in as I worked my way down in rainbow order, and just overlaid the die-cut flower frames on top of it, and it's very simple and very elegant.